Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first episode of Series 2 of the Osint Bunker podcast. This week we're joined by a special guest, Mr. Kyle Glen, who is not going to say anything apparently.
Sorry, I wasn't sure
you're
if you
not going to introduce yourself.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were waiting for me to introduce myself or no. Sorry.
For it, mate, go for it.
As I said, my name is Kyle. I'm one of the founders of the Conflict News Twitter account. I've been doing interested in OSINT now for the last 7-8 years. So yeah, thanks for having me.
And obviously,
yeah, Kyle's definitely one of the OGs in the space. To use a certain term, definitely has the most experience of getting yelled at by random people on Twitter.
Oh yeah, getting yelled at, being accused of being a shill for any country you could think of. Yeah, so still waiting for my checks. Still waiting for my checks from everyone.
Yeah, the Indians are going to pay me. The Pakistanis are going to pay us. You know, someday someone's going to cut us a check eventually.
Yeah, and so we start the season off with Kyle. He's going to be the first of several guests we have on the podcast from the open sources intelligence community as we sort of discuss the ongoing topics in the world and everything. So, introductions done. What say we talk about Afghanistan?
I'm just going to take a second to bang my head against the table, and then we can get back to this. I know we spent the last podcast sort of talking about the situation as a whole and sort of, how it coalesced and came together and what events led to, the collapse of Afghanistan. The last 2 weeks haven't really changed that assessment that much. The leaked intel reports we've seen, the diplomatic cables, pretty much everything is sort of coalesced around this one narrative that, the US pulled out, left a number of countries in the dark about sort of the ramifications of the pullout. Other countries did drop the ball in the intelligence department, not preparing as much for some eventualities. But there still were a number of people in the intelligence field sort of screaming about what could happen. And of course, the Afghan army collapse was, not expected per se, but definitely was well within the realm of possibilities. The U.S. airlift was a success. I will say that the U.S. airlift to get people out of Afghanistan, when you look at the raw numbers, over 100,000 people evacuated, it was a success. On the other hand, a number of people were not able to leave the country, including SIV applicants, some American citizens, and a lot of Afghans who would be at risk. On the side of the SIV applicants, there was definitely a lot of sandbagging coming from the State Department, and I've talked to people about this, where either SIV applicants would try to be processed, and then either security screeners of the State Department would, spend months trying to get extra information for them and just ruthlessly grill them, which, if you look at the numbers, just resulted in, only a few thousand applicants being accepted over the last few years. And that just absolutely hampered the US's ability to actually get people out. And so that was more on the State Department end. On the military end of things, of course, we all know how heroically they executed the pullout in the situation they were put in. And unfortunately, they weren't able to properly manage all the risks. And I had said last episode, I don't know how they could properly manage all the risks. And of course, we all know how that ended. I just, what are your guys' thoughts on that whole situation?
I was going to go back to what you said about it not being so much expected. I was saying this earlier. I was reading through some reports from 2015, 2016, about like really the reconstruction in Afghanistan, and it was a quote which really stood out to me. It says from March 2014, and it's from General Joseph Dunford, and it was in the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he said Afghan security forces will begin to deteriorate upon coalition withdrawal. The only debate is the pace of the deterioration. So they knew it was going to happen in 2014, that as soon as like the US or like the coalition pulled out, that the Afghan armed forces were just going to immediately start collapsing. Um, and I even said here that the special forces became the best of the best, but conventional forces suffered from high attrition and serious deficits in training, equipment, and readiness. So 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, they were fully aware of what was going to happen if they suddenly pulled out. Um, and I think that just makes it even more frustrating that they did it in the way they did it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the main debate was on the speed of the collapse, but there were definitely people saying that the collapse could happen very, very quickly, and sort of leave the U.S. and other NATO allies also sort of caught out in the entire situation, and not being able to evacuate people from outside of Kabul as well, which was a huge, huge issue even at the start of the evacuation, was people who were outside of the city couldn't really get in and couldn't get from other parts of Afghanistan. And that was definitely one of the many issues, of course, with the evacuation. But yeah, there was a pretty good idea of what would happen, and warnings were ignored. But that happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought. I was going to say that someone else step in.
Someone jump in, save him. It just I will say, sort of moving forward with that, the security risks, which I know, people said that Bagram should have been retaken. At the point that the U.S. had sort of committed to the withdrawal earlier in the summer, with seriously retrograding out equipment and troops very quickly. Once it got to that sort of 90+% withdrawal point, reintroducing troops was a really hard situation, and retaking any assets would have been incredibly hard as well. I think the decision, or the error in the decision making, more lies in abandoning the assets in the first place. Bagram, a lot of people agree, would have been easier to control than Kabul. It wouldn't have been more susceptible to having massive crowds and sort of that poor crowd control situation. It would have been sort of separated from a lot of the issues with the Taliban as well. So, I mean, sort of looking back, there was definitely, as we said in the last podcast episode, this need to be out as quickly as possible without sort of understanding potential tactical ramifications, which is when people from state are attempting to lead the military on tactical decisions, stuff doesn't really end well, and we sort of saw that proven with this situation. And I think we should probably pivot to the main topic of what we were going to hit on this podcast, which was, we know how the evacuation went. We know the events leading up to the evacuation. We sort of wanted to talk about both the media environment around the entire situation, and how, there's been a lot of disinformation. There's been a lot of people sort of grandstanding without concerning the actual facts on the ground, and without concerning, the people on the ground as well. And it's been a lot of people trying to score political wins, and that's definitely reduced the quality, I think, of a lot of the information getting out, because a lot of people are trying to use or cherry pick selectively things that make their narrative look good, which sort of misses the point. I think we were going to hit on first captured Taliban, or captured equipment given to the Afghan army. I know people have been passing around inflated figures, and I know Kyle has done a lot of research on that over the past week, trying to figure out what the actual numbers are.
Yeah, so the infographic I'm sure everyone's seen going around said, I can't remember what the total monetary value was, but I think it was 8 or 9 billion, I think. Is that right? Does that sound right to you guys? That they said that
Uh,
like the Taliban had captured, or was it even more than that? Was it 80 billion
yeah,
maybe?
it was. I
Or
thought it
Yeah, I
was. I
think it was
thought it was like
82
83
billion or
billion or
something.
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm missing a zero off there. But yeah, it was a ridiculous amount of money. And I found like the infographic here where they said that I mean, it just says military hardware left in Afghanistan. It says 3,000 Humvees, 32 Mi-17s, 3 C-130s, 43 MD-530s, 33 Black Hawks, and so on. And it's just, it doesn't at all match up with what reality is. Like, the Taliban absolutely don't have 33 Black Hawks. They don't have 43 MD-530 or 530s or 32 Mi-17s. It's just not at all realistic. I think maybe there's been evidence of them operating 5 or 6 helicopters
Yeah.
total. I don't know if you guys have seen more than that.
It was one Mi-17, a couple of Blackhawks, and uh, I saw pictures of MD-530s, but they were not operational. So yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. So like, it's just it doesn't fit with reality. And even the claim here of 3,000 Humvees. I was looking through Oryx's blog, which again is a fantastic collection of. I don't know how he's managed it, but he's got what I can remember the date was. So from June 2021 until 14th of August 21, he's documented like the entire Afghan military losses. So I mean that includes 12 tanks, 12 captured tanks, 7 T-54s, and 5 T-62s. Um, in terms of helicopters, he's got 13 Mi-17s, of which 5, 6, maybe even more he's got listed as destroyed, um, and 7 Black Hawks, of which 3 or 4 are destroyed. So, I mean, that's all he's got. So, total, he's got 13, 20, 23 helicopters total captured, um, maybe 8 or 9 not fully destroyed. However many of those are operational is for debate, I suppose. Um, I guess like the main thing they had was what he's got listed as trucks, vehicles, and jeeps, um, of which he's got only 106 destroyed, but 1,980 captured, and that includes Humvees, Ford Rangers, and just various trucks. So I mean, like, it's definitely not great in terms of the equipment they've captured, um, but it's definitely not as horrific as the media are trying to make out. And it's definitely not like a massive 80
Yeah.
billion loss. And like I said, a lot of the soldiers who were kind of left high and dry from their superiors, fled into Iran with equipment. They fled into Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which again I haven't managed to find any solid numbers on that. Reuters have said they received 22 military planes and 24 helicopters. They also shot one down, so I don't know if that's part of the 22 or if that's 23.
They
But
did shoot down an A-29, didn't they? Yeah.
yeah, and one
Or
also
no, it
crashed.
wasn't a shoot down. It was a midair collision between a MiG-29 and an A-29.
But were they
Um,
separate events? I thought it was.
I
I
believe
thought.
I believe the reporting ended up coalescing around the fact that it was a single event.
Oh, okay. I
Um,
thought it was
it
separate
was a midair
events.
collision. Yeah. I mean, the main thing is basically almost every single aircraft, both rotary wing assets and fixed wing aircraft that could fly, get off the ground, and get out of Afghanistan, got out of Afghanistan.
Oh yeah.
A few aircraft in flyable condition were left. That's what we're seeing flying around now, and very much being broadcast through Taliban media and through Taliban propaganda. They're very happy about the, 3 or 4 working helicopters they've been able to start flying right now. I mean, we saw on the ground in Terbez in Uzbekistan, we saw 11 out of the 18 Pilatus PC-12s that the Afghan Air Force had, 6 out of the 19 A-29 Super Tucanos, and 4 or 5 potentially of their Cessna 208s. The thing was, the Afghan army relied massively on outside contractor help for both repair and supplies, and the Taliban has none of that now. When that started to be withdrawn from the Afghan Air Force, their ability to actually conduct operations and repair their aircraft effectively went away, which again helped contribute to the collapse. Talked about that last week. Um, so you just sort of have this situation where, yeah, sure, the Taliban captured a lot of assets, even, the ground vehicles. I mean, Humvees are not reliable at all. They're going to be, even if they have the technicians to repair them, they're going to be cannibalizing spare parts, and that number of usable vehicles is just going to slide down. And so, they don't really have the situation where they have the exterior support to keep up maintenance on these vehicles and actually keep them operational. So, even over the next few years, we're going to see the usable number of vehicles they've captured plummet, basically.
And in terms of numbers, while it could be argued that at the moment they have enough equipment for a small army, realistically the amount of it that is actually usable, as you've said, is so small that we're not going to see it as a huge threat realistically. They'll probably use them for a few months, I would imagine largely for sort of enforcing their rule in Kabul and some of the other cities. But beyond that, as you say, without the maintenance support, which they could still get from China, because China has been very clearly sort of lining itself up to assist the Taliban government. But unless they get that kind of support from China, which is going to be expensive, the chances are, give it 6 months, a year, 99% of the equipment that they have captured is going to be unusable.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, what do they actually need the equipment for? I mean, the whole thing about the Taliban was, with their takeover of Afghanistan, it was as much of a political victory that enabled their military victory. They got regional governors to surrender without shots fired. It was more this idea that the Taliban were bound to win that really was the catalyst that resulted in the fall of Afghanistan. So, I mean, you're going to see the Taliban fighting force is incredibly irregular. A very large portion of them are going to go home over the fall or basically starting now for harvest, and then over the winter, everyone goes home because no one fights in Afghanistan in the winter. So you're going to see the situation where, they'll have effectively small forces holding the cities, but they aren't really going to have uses for these large numbers of vehicles that they've captured. So, they're most likely going to fall into disrepair, which a lot of them already are. And you're just going to see this degradation of the equipment they've captured. And we all sort of knew that was going to happen. I mean, it happened when they got into power in the first place back in the 90s. So sort of trying to create this narrative of, oh God, the Taliban has this massive advanced army now, it's not fear mongering, but there's certainly an element of sensationalism, I guess.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, and I mean, like I said, they're not going to have any use for it, because for all the intents and purposes, except for like the small resistance in the Panjshir Valley, the country's mostly at peace at the moment. There's no need for a massive kind of military force. And especially, and even in that valley, I mean, we've all seen the photos going around Twitter of just like the roads in and out of it. It's completely implausible that you'd even need, like, you can't even get like a large convoy through those mountain passes without them just getting kind of bunged up. So they're not even much use in the fighting there, which is, it seems to be mostly just kind of everyone taking pop shots at each other from the top of hills and stuff. So they're just kind of sit around, because the Taliban, they I guess massive arsenal of vehicles is going to be, the only people it's going to be a threat to is again people of Afghanistan. There's like, they're not going to be a threat to any of Afghanistan's neighbors or anything like that, which is not going to be an issue. And what you were saying about the maintenance, again, I was reading on the some reports from the Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, said that the target for the Afghan National Army to maintain their own equipment was 80%, so maintain 80% of their own equipment. And again, as of early this year, they were maintaining under 20% of it, with the Afghan National Police only maintaining 12% of their own equipment. So, with the amount of, soldiers that fled the country, either to the neighbors or kind of, in the Kabul airlift, there's going to be no one in the country at the moment that's going to be capable of maintaining most of the vehicles that have been captured. So they're just going to kind of sit in depots or on military bases and then just kind of waste away, I think, for the most part.
A lot will be scrapped, probably, for scrap metal and that stuff. But again, it's this whole idea of the Taliban never had this sort of large standing army. Unlike the NA and unlike the ANP, there was just no need for it. I mean, these were seasonal fighters, basically. I mean, they have small, very small forces that are professionally trained in camps and actually sort of serve full time, but most of their fighters are this seasonal sort of irregular force, which again has served them well over the past 20 years. But we're going to see most of this equipment brought away, just like Kyle said.
Yeah, I mean, so again, like the images of the like the Badri 313 Battalion, in all their fancy equipment, it looks good on TV. But again, I don't know what the total size of their special forces are, but they're a tiny percentage of the entire Taliban force.
Yeah, we're talking about hundreds of people here at most.
Yeah, and I can't remember which was it a British politician or an American politician, or just referred to them most of them as like country boys or something like that, or some ridiculous comparison. They just
it was the head of the British Armed Forces.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. They just said,
Nick Carter.
Yeah, he said, they're just good old country boys or something like that, something along those lines. Which,
that assessment, it's
not wrong,
as per se. Incredibly badly, but it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's this sort of romanticism applied to it, whereas, like, that's the Taliban are not romantic, but they definitely are, this irregular force of good old country boys.
And you mentioned the Panjshir Valley, and I don't know if you boys have actually seen the sort of the news that's coming this evening. There are indications that after a day of heavy fighting there today, the valley may actually have fallen to the Taliban.
Yeah, I did see something.
It's unclear. The Taliban denied that it fell. It's honestly, that's the one main loss we had from Afghanistan is pretty much all of the reliable reporters we've seen are no longer in the country, which effectively leaves us with this amalgamation of Taliban media, which is effectively propaganda, and just this fairly large, mess of information that comes out. Which requires this sort of correlation and attempting to get to the bottom of rumors effectively, which is what we're good at, or not good at per se, but what we try to do. But it's certainly the media environment in Afghanistan has certainly been reduced in quality.
Mm-hmm. And it is entirely possible, of course, that the valley may well have fallen today. Like you say, we haven't managed to get that verified yet, but it's worth mentioning that yesterday the Pentagon press secretary was asked if the DoD would be prepared to support the resistance fighters there with airstrikes against the Taliban, and the response was, quote, "The US military mission in Afghanistan is over," end quote. Which, I mean, again, we kind of
pretty final, isn't it?
Yeah, we kind of saw that response coming.
I don't think that was really a surprise to any of us. It's a disappointing reality, but yeah.
I think we've had sort of more of a positive response from the UK, really, with indications from the Ministry of Defence that there was a chance that the UK would be prepared to carry out airstrikes in Afghanistan as part of its continuing fight in Syria and Iraq against ISIL and other groups. But I think it's fair to say there is not going to be anywhere near the level of support that the US could have provided. And as I said in an article I wrote for the UK Defence Journal yesterday, the chances are that it's not going to matter now how much support we give the resistance in Afghanistan. They are going to lose that fight, unfortunately, because of the position that they've been left in.
Yeah, and I mean also like the literal geographic position of of the valley as well. It's it's not on like the border of any countries like Tajikistan or Uzbekistan, who again I think in the early days I think there were some rumors that Uzbekistan were trying to get some weapons to them. But I mean, I'm just looking on a map now, and I mean, like, as the crow flies, it's a good 200 kilometers, more than 200 kilometers from any kind of usable border. And to kind of try and get any kind of weapons through 200 kilometers of Taliban-controlled country is going to be a task in itself. Um, it's completely implausible, I know, but I was just thinking like the only thing that might possibly work was if they could try to maybe set up like a Turkey-style safe zone on one of the borders in the north, maybe like a 10-kilometer deep kind of strip or something like that. But again, I know that's never going to happen. Um,
Yeah,
but
a lot of countries bordering it. Sorry, correction. Two countries in specific that border Afghanistan. Turkmenistan, or I believe it's actually Turkmenistan hasn't said anything publicly yet, but the two other countries that at least have some public relations, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, who border Afghanistan to the north, and both have significant border crossings into Afghanistan, have expressed concern, I think, would be the proper term at the obvious situation happening in Afghanistan right now, and both are concerned, of course, about extremism being imported to the north. Both Tajikistan and Uzbekistan have had problems with extremist attacks in the past that they at least say have originated from Afghanistan. And Uzbekistan actually has a fairly major city sitting on the border with Afghanistan as well. So there's this whole situation where these Central Asian countries have looked at this destabilization to the south, and it's sitting right on their border. It's something that they're forced to deal with. So we may possibly see them take action in the near future. It's not like the Taliban is a very advanced enemy. So they may take limited action against the Taliban in order to secure their own border areas. And it most likely any action would be taken by Uzbekistan just because of the nature of how their border works and how populated their border area is. But it's one of those destabilizing factors that I don't think members or that people who wanted to leave Afghanistan didn't really think of about how key Afghanistan is in the area and how a destabilized Afghanistan results in more regional issues. But hey, forever war, right?
Yeah.
no, definitely. Yeah, it's just an awful situation all around, really. There's no good answer, is there, to any of the issues going on in the country at the moment. Especially the issue of I don't know how many were confirmed to have been left behind after like the airlift ended, but I know there was a significant amount. Like, were there any US nationals, like US passport holders? I'm sure there was a few, wasn't there?
Yeah,
That's
there's
still
over
stranded in
100.
country. I don't know, and I've personally spoken to at least two or three British passport holders who are still in country and are trying to get out. So it's a really difficult situation for everyone. Um, Especially as like Kabul, for all intents and purposes, is shut off from the rest of the country at the moment.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's very easy to get in or out of the city at the moment. Um, and even if they could get out of the city, I know Pakistan were shutting their border crossings in the last couple of days. There was um, a couple of Afghan civilians were killed. One of the major border crossings, wasn't there? And I think like a Pakistani border guard was killed as well by gunfire. So it's really tricky situation as well for the neighbors of Afghanistan in terms of trying to just not stem the flow, but just trying to manage the flow of refugees out of the country.
Yeah, because any country that sort of opens their borders back up to Afghanistan is going to face this massive refugee flow because, I mean, Afghanistan, people will try to leave. People will continue to try to leave. And of course, those neighboring countries will have to control that flow. The main countries that will have to deal with that, of course, will probably end up being Pakistan and then Tajikistan and Uzbekistan because those are the easiest countries to actually then move on out of that area. I mean, again, regional destabilization. One thing we are seeing is Qatar actually looks like they're trying to um, help the Taliban reopen Kabul International Airport. That seems like something they're at least trying to sort of put together at this point. Um,
So
they've
wasn't there,
landed.
I was gonna say, wasn't like domestic, well, not domestic, but wasn't like international flights meant to resume today? Was it tomorrow or one of them?
I've seen nothing that reflects that yet. But they Qatar has landed technical teams in Afghanistan in order to facilitate a reopening of the airport. So
And I know
we may see
Turkey
that in the
was.
near future.
Yeah, I know Turkey was looking at similar aid to getting Kabul airport up and running. I don't know if they've actually been able to assist with that or if they were turned away by the Taliban.
There was a lot of rumors around Turkey and the Taliban, wasn't there, saying that they were going to kind of turn the airport into a kind of, again, like a kind of safe zone, and like Turkey were going to take control of the airport. But I think they were definitely turned away by the Taliban on that option.
I think the
Um,
security risks ended up being too much for them to really not handle per se, but stomach maybe. I think that might be the right term for it. It's just the security situation changed so quickly with the end and the pullout as a whole, and that scared a lot of the players who wanted to actually assist in managing the airport and reopening things.
mhm.
So into the future we'll see whether or not Turkey wants to rejoin that, but for right now Qatar seems to be positioning themselves as the main uh, uh how do I put the conduit to the West, where they've always served as this sort of not middleman per se, but more of a neutral power in the region, where they're friendly sort of with everyone except for, of course, Saudi Arabia, but that's more because Saudi Arabia doesn't like them. Um,
Yeah.
but they were, of course, the facilitators for the negotiations between the Taliban and the U.S. So we'll most likely see them continue to be a conduit to the West and this sort of vital connection. If the Taliban are to either A, get foreign currency um, or aid in any way, shape, or form. I mean, nearly half of Afghanistan's economy last year was foreign aid. Um, Afghanistan does not produce a lot of stuff domestically, and their imports are a very large portion of their economy. Their economy is sort of screwed. Yeah, that's the word. Screwed right
Yeah.
now. Um,
Especially with the Taliban claiming that they're going to stop heroin production, which we'll see. Uh,
it's not even that. It's just no one has the ability to get some sort of stable work going right now. The stability in countries is very low, and the previous monetary aid that the country has been running on has been cut off. So it's just, again, this instability is the enemy of progress,
oh,
especially in the
definitely.
economic side of things. So we'll see that evolve into the future, and I don't think without significant international aid, Afghanistan will be able to do well. And
Well,
and
that's where China's going to come in, isn't it? Because, there's the $1 trillion or whatever it is worth of minerals in Afghanistan. Obviously, the US weren't able to get their hands on, and obviously why China is so interested at the moment. They're not suddenly buddying up with the Taliban, out of the goodness of their heart. They want to get their hands on those minerals. So,
yeah, China's more interested in sort of the economic colonialism of it. They're not really
yeah,
interested in improving. They're not really interested in improving the livelihoods of people. I mean, what Western countries were doing were just dumping money into Afghanistan. China actually wants to get something out of it. So they'll do what's ever required in order to secure whatever mines they set up or whatever transportation links they set up throughout Afghanistan. But apart from that, I really don't see China doing much to support the people of Afghanistan. They may make token moves and PR stuff, but I don't really.
No, definitely. And did I read as well that the Taliban were banning kind of again I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here. Is it oh God, the ethnic group in China that's being genocided. I can't pronounce it.
Oh, yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, I've never said it out loud.
Uyghur.
Yeah, I've never said it out loud before, and I've never realized how I'm
How
positive
difficult it
I'm
is to
butchering
say
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm sure I read that you know with China kind of buddying up to the Taliban, I'm sure I read that the Taliban had then banned anyone from that particular ethnic group from participating in well or joining their ranks in country, which is again very interesting.
Oh, that's like fairly, light for them. That's not even the worst stuff
Oh
they've
no,
done.
I
I
know, but I
mean,
mean, but it's yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of it's obviously one of the concessions they've made in terms of getting Chinese assistance so that they like banning this group from operating in the country. Obviously, it's nowhere near any of the worst things they've done, but it's definitely like definitely like a signal of like the cooperation between China and the Taliban, was the early cooperation, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. The Taliban seems to have not sacrificed a lot of their views over the past few years, but they're trying to sort of put forward this new what is it? The inclusive Taliban. That's
Hmm.
what the chief of the British Army said. But it's this PR view of the Taliban trying to make them look more Western friendly in order to again secure that international funding which they need. Um, and sort of to legitimize their rule because we all know what happened between 1996 and 2001 when their rule really wasn't legitimate. I mean, they started to receive help from the U.S. to actually quash opium production, but apart from that, they really were pariahs in the international scene.
Hmm.
Um, and whether or not people are forced to turn to opium production again because of a decreasing or declining economic situation, and whether or not the Afghan currency collapses, and there are just a bunch of these factors that really puts a lot of strain on the people of Afghanistan, and that's the worst thing we can see because talk about the Taliban as much as you want, the real people suffering here are the people of Afghanistan. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I it may not breed cycles of extremism, but it's a lot of people who had relative stability who are now thrown into just these series of very unstable events that I foresee in the near future.
No, and on the topic of cycles of extremism, you can't say about mentioning the recent drone strike in Kabul that killed, what was it, like 6 children and
Mm.
3 other civilians. I
Over
mean,
the
it's
horizon capabilities. Come on, we're great at it.
yeah, and I mean, like it's just like you just you just leaving the place and then just putting it down on your way out, kind of thing. It's just another kind of kick in the teeth to the people of Afghanistan, isn't it? That you're leaving them in this kind of disaster is the only word I can think of, and then you're just still killing civilians on your way out. It's just, I mean, it's embarrassing. I think is the only word
Yeah,
you can
I
really.
mean, I think that strike was a pretty good example of how much of a farce the claim of over the horizon airstrikes are and over the horizon power projection is in combating terrorism. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
you know great. You might get the right person, or you might get the wrong person, or you might have 1100% civilian casualties. Um,
Yeah,
and it's just it's
and at
this
least
rejection of the reality of the situation and abandoning, long held tenets of counterterrorism and intelligence gathering and just all this different stuff that just, throw it out the window.
Yeah,
yeah, they should have learned over 20 years. You can't just bomb an insurgency. You can't just defeat an insurgency just by dropping bombs from 30,000 feet or whatever it is. That's not the way it's going to work. And the claim that they killed, I don't know, is it like other than that drone strike, they said there's a couple other strikes in which they claimed they killed, the planners of the Kabul airport bombing, but refused to release the names of who they were, and it just doesn't really
Yeah, it's,
inspire kind of, not loyalty, that's the word I'm thinking of. Believe in them. I can't think of the word what it means when you believe someone, but that's what I mean. Like it doesn't seem to be like
trust.
yeah, trustworthy. They're not the most trustworthy claims. They claim the drone strike in Kabul. They claim at first it was what was that, a VBIED, a car bomb. They claimed it was, and then they said, oh no, they seen people put in, or that there was multiple suicide bombers in the car. And then they revised it to they saw them placing explosives in like the trunk, the boot of the car. Um, but there's just no evidence to support these claims, and it wouldn't, like it's not unheard of for them to release, like drone footage of airstrikes and stuff like that, especially in Iraq and
Yeah.
Syria. They'll release the footage to back up, their claims, and the fact that they haven't done that in Afghanistan is somewhat telling. Obviously, a lot of civilians die. Obviously they don't want to provide, they don't want to tell on themselves with that, but.
Yeah.
Again, it's not the most trustworthy of claims.
And the other major issue with these over the horizon strike ideas.
Oh, we've lost someone.
Yeah, it's technical. I think his internet's gone. The other thing as well with these strikes that we've got to bear in mind is that now they haven't got boots on the ground to sort of give them real time data about what they're hitting. They haven't got aircraft flying overhead providing reconnaissance or providing real-time sort of laser designation or whatever. And so all of these over-the-horizon strikes that President Biden keeps emphasising are going to be useful, they're not realistically going to be that useful. They are going to be hitting sort of fixed targets at most.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to know what else is there otherwise. And they are going to see a rise in civilian casualties, because at the end of the day, without that real-time data, they cannot accurately say, oh yeah, this target area is devoid of civilians who are going to get hurt.
No, exactly, and again, that's been the issue for 20 years, hasn't it? Really, is just like the airstrikes which lead to civilian casualties. And like you were saying, it's a cycle of extremism. I'm not so proud to think that if I was living in Afghanistan myself and an airstrike killed a family member of mine or a friend of mine, you absolutely would. If someone gave you the opportunity to get revenge on those people, you absolutely would. And it's like the main issue of the US, especially like again like these just kind of. I guess the only word I can think of is just almost like petulant airstrikes on the way out, just kind of trying to get the last word in almost.
Yeah.
Like they know they've lost the war, they know the Taliban have won, they've been made to look like mugs basically on the world stage. And they just kind of chucking a couple of airstrikes on the way out the door, which again, all they managed to do is even if you take them at face value, all they've managed to do is kill maybe 2 or 3 middle managers of ISIS in Afghanistan, and 9 civilians. It's not really and of those 9 civilians, I think 1 was like an interpreter. I think 2 or 3 of them actually, worked at the embassy, and 6 of them were children under the age of 10. It's really not.
Yeah, it doesn't look good at all.
No, exactly. I mean, even it's you really can't argue that any target would be worth
that kind of civilian
casualty. Even if they managed, even if kind of going back to Obama and when they killed bin Laden, if they said, oh yeah, we got bin Laden, but we also killed 9 children at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, you definitely would get people that would argue it was justified, but it absolutely wouldn't be. It's still just one guy at the end of the day who, obviously, planned and carried out one of the most horrific terror attacks in history, basically. But you really have to weigh up the casualties there. But it's just The more I think about it, the more it winds me up, and it annoys me just how poorly the whole thing was kind of planned and
Yeah.
carried out from
And
start to finish, really.
and the way that it has been carried out has unfortunately left a vacuum, hasn't it? Because
Hmm.
although it's allowed the Taliban to sort of charge across Afghanistan and take over vast amounts of territory very, very quickly, they haven't been backfilling. So,
Oh no,
as
no.
much as they've been rushing across the country, it's not just them. You've got, as we've discussed, ISIL have sort of flooded a little bit into Afghanistan. Like, they were already present in Afghanistan, it's fair to say, um, but it's kind of given them now a bit of a safe haven, hasn't it? And
Absolutely. There's definitely a danger of a resurgence for them because
yeah,
obviously they were, I guess, at their peak in Afghanistan in maybe 2014. Um, and obviously then we had Trump drop in the Moab on him, wasn't it? That was
yes.
the big event. Was that 2014 as well?
Uh,
Um, I can't
no,
remember when that
it would
was.
have been after that, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, of course it would.
I think that would have been about 2017, probably. If
Yeah,
I
tw
remember right.
yeah. Obviously not 2014, but yeah, obviously, so they've been around since 2014. They probably, obviously, they started coming to people's attention a little bit more then, maybe around 2016, 2017. Obviously, Trump dropped the bomb on them. But again, the main issue is obviously the Taliban aren't going to have the kind of intelligence network, I suppose, to counter ISIS in Afghanistan. Like obviously the government had obviously they had the assistance from the US, they had the assistance from everyone basically in terms of kind of any kind of counterinsurgency against the Taliban and ISIS at the time as well.
Yeah,
But obviously the Taliban aren't going to have obviously I'm not saying obviously they have their own intelligence units and stuff like that. They've obviously got a very deep network of I don't even know what you call them, but they're only not spies obviously, probably more akin to military intelligence, I guess,
yeah,
in country, a lot of human intelligence, but especially in some of the more like rural areas where uh like ISIS is going to be kind of thriving now, especially when there's just again, like you said, a power vacuum. Um, that's going to be the real issue.
mm.
And again, it's kind of lucky that Afghanistan is almost isolated from any other countries in which there's a large kind of ISIS presence. Um,
I,
Obviously
I
that.
I would
Oh,
disagree actually. I would think the main threat the Taliban did a fairly good job in 2018 and 2019 of rooting ISIS out of the territory that they actually held. There's some fairly intense videos and recountings of the conflict that happened in that area and
mhm.
in Ocean Valley. They were very effective in rooting out that actual physical ISIS presence, and they drove ISIS back underground. I think the main thing that we risk is this reemergence of this Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. We've seen Al Qaeda leadership return to Afghanistan already. People that were close to Bin Laden are now back out in the open in Afghanistan.
Mhm.
The chatter for foreign networks of Al Qaeda affiliated fighters is going wild with the prospect of being able to return to Afghanistan, and the new Taliban government is saying things like Osama bin Laden wasn't responsible for 9/11. So I think the main risk is this institutionalized um, uh, not permission, but this sort of looking the other way. This implied blessing that the Taliban are giving to Al Qaeda to operate out of Afghanistan again, and that is
Yeah,
something that we definitely risk. Um, and the U.S. obviously now has very, very diminished capabilities to strike targets in Afghanistan. We may see that um, come back to hurt us in the future because
yeah.
unlike ISIS, who is very much concerned with establishing a physical caliphate and more attacking regional powers and regional figures like Qatar and Iran and Syria, Al Qaeda is much more focused on attacking Western powers and their presence in the Middle East. So, American assets in Iraq may be targeted, American assets in the Gulf states may be targeted, and then American assets further abroad may be targeted as well, and European assets too. And that's definitely this risk that we face because not saying that ISIS was less of a threat, but they were certainly less focused on attacking America and more focused on sort of establishing their own presence in the Middle East. And that definitely is something that we risk with the reemergence of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan.
No, definitely. Yeah. And again, I don't know if maybe I don't know if the threat to Iraq will be higher, but definitely some of the Gulf states, definitely. Because the thing with Iraq is it's so. I mean, I can't even fit. I mean, ISIS are obviously still active in Iraq, but they're so. I mean, kind of like similar to Afghanistan, they've been driven underground pretty hard.
Yeah.
And whatever your opinion is on the kind of the kind of the Iranian-backed groups like the PMF or PMU or whichever acronym you choose, they've done a pretty good job as well of kind of stomping out any kind of ISIS resistance they come across. They regularly post in on on Telegram, kind of they still getting into the occasional fight with them. And Iraq is ISIS is definitely still a threat in Iraq, but mostly they're limited to, as far as I can tell, blowing up power pylons wherever they can find them. That seems to be their favorite activity at the moment. But like Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, I think that would definitely be a big threat to the Gulf states, especially with being on the border of Pakistan. Who, I mean, you never know with Pakistan if they're going to be allies or enemy, really, do you? Especially with Bin Laden hiding out there for so long. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think definitely the threat to the Gulf states is definitely a lot higher than it would be to kind of Iraq or sorry, just Iraq or Kuwait. Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say as well, and we have discussed this before, that Afghanistan is now effectively a safe haven for those groups. We've already seen sort of ISIS aligned terrorists carrying out attacks. We've obviously we woke up this morning to the very sad news from New Zealand of 6 people stabbed in a terrorist incident down there. We can't say we're surprised by that. New Zealand obviously was one of the countries involved in Afghanistan over the sort of the 20 years that NATO was there, albeit arguably one of the smaller nations involved. And I'm sure in the coming days we'll find out the exact reasoning behind the attack and so on and so forth. But it's something we are going to see again, sort of resurging. I don't doubt we are going to probably have another sort of major summer next year, like we did in 2017 across Europe, where we will see probably dozens of attacks in major cities. How much of that is going to be ISIS and how much of that is going to be Al Qaeda and other groups, we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, as we've discussed, the fact that Afghanistan is now effectively a free roaming zone for those groups, it's a really, really bad move by the West.
Absolutely.
And it's funny, you were talking just now, obviously, about we're fast approaching now the anniversary of 9/11, and President Biden has literally just announced that he is declassifying the entire 9/11 investigation. We'll stick a link to the article relating to that in the description for the podcast. But the timing is interesting for that. What's your thoughts on that, guys?
I mean, I hadn't heard that. That's definitely interesting. And I'm definitely gonna be checking it out as soon as that comes out. I'll definitely be giving that a read. I don't understand the reasoning behind it as such. I mean, obviously it's the 20th anniversary. Obviously, it's a big milestone. Um, but I'm just yeah, I can't really think of. I mean, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it will kind of clamp down on maybe some of the conspiracy theories, but I think that's wishful thinking,
Yeah.
to be honest. Um, because, when would they believe anything that came out of the government? But I think it's definitely going to be an interesting read. Um, it's going to be, again, especially in terms of, I don't know what it's going to mention in it. Um, how much, if it's going to kind of point the finger even stronger at Saudi Arabia, would be interesting.
Mm.
But I think that would require,
It wouldn't surprise me if sort of that does end up being the case, particularly when you bear in mind that US relations with Saudi Arabia have not exactly been strong since Biden became president.
no.
I think it's fair to say that there's sort of been a bit of a not a particularly public scuffle between the two, but I mean, we obviously right at the start of the Biden administration we had the cancellation of a major defence contract, which sort of really annoyed the Saudis, and understandably so. I don't think diplomatic relations have entirely recovered from that since. We've not really seen an awful lot happen, but
No, and what wasn't it, didn't Biden threaten to kind of pull the Patriots out of Saudi Arabia as well? Was that a thing, or have I made that up?
no, that was a thing. I don't know if that's actually happened yet, or what the situation is with that, because there was quite a lot of talk of that in sort of February March time, and then with everything that's been going on in Iran and Afghanistan since, it's kind of sort of. I'm sure it's probably still
The
going
moot
on.
point.
Yeah, it's probably still going on, but it's no longer frontline news, and
No, because Iran has definitely slipped out of the world's attention, hasn't it?
yeah,
Especially all those ship attacks and
yeah,
the mining of the strait and all the rest of it. That was definitely and obviously, I mean, we're assuming Israel hasn't responded to any of those yet, but I think that's probably going to be the next
the next
I
big
mean,
next
Israel
big
is
event.
definitely making noise about Iran's increased capability to conduct attacks, and of course their uh, not quickening pace per se of getting or acquiring nuclear material for a nuclear weapon, but just continuing pace.
Hmm. No, definitely. And well, there was meant to be in the last couple of days, didn't Iran say they were open to kind of sitting down and talking, but only after they hit the next milestone in terms of the
uranium enrichment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
was
mean,
gonna
I'm
say
sure Iran would love a Taliban style deal. Um,
Well, one where they spend months negotiating and then walk away from the table because actually they've already got everything they wanted with the time that they've wasted.
exactly.
Is probably what we're
yes.
talking there.
It's crazy, like the more you think about like how like interconnected everything is really, especially with Afghanistan and I haven't seen so many articles about it recently, because I'm not sure how many refugees went to Iran. There's definitely a few soldiers that went into Iran. Um, but there was in the last few years there was definitely reports on, like Afghan refugees who fled the country to Iran and were then forced to fight for Iran in Syria,
Hmm.
um, against, either in the kind of north of the country against like Turkey and such, or maybe down south, in which case they're in direct conflict with Israel. Um, but it's crazy that a more unstable Afghanistan could lead to like an increase in conflict between Iran and Israel, especially when you got Afghan refugees fighting for Iran in Syria against Turkish mercenaries and US based militias in the east of the country, and it's an I know obviously Afghanistan's not in the Middle East, but
Yeah.
like the events in Afghanistan definitely have the possibility of influencing events in the Middle East, shall we say. Um, Especially obviously, with it bordering Iran, who seem to, again, I don't think as many refugees have kind of headed for that border
No.
as some of the others.
I think we've probably seen photos more of equipment heading for Iran rather than refugees.
Yeah, especially when you look at where Kabul is on a map compared to Iran. It's pretty much Kabul's over in like kind of central, well, middle east, I guess,
Yeah.
of Afghanistan, and obviously Iran's on on the western border. So it is probably, I mean, I'm useless at estimating distance, but there's probably a good 500, 600 kilometers between them.
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely should have had a map of like the provinces of Afghanistan up, but from what I remember, like the provinces on the kind of Iranian border, they were one of the first, I think, to kind of fall, if I remember correctly. Um, Look now, yeah. So you've got Herat. I'm pronouncing this horribly. Probably Herat, Farah, and Nimruz, which again probably horrendous pronunciation. I do apologize. You got three big provinces on the western border there, and yeah, from what I remember, they were pretty early on in terms of like the kind of Taliban blitzkrieg. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a better way of explaining it. They were, I think they fell pretty early on. And then also there was the ones on like kind of like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan border as well.
Yeah.
So I think Iran have again not really seen that many refugees. Um, I don't know how many Pakistan have seen. Again, it's really difficult to kind of because obviously the country is it's almost entirely shut off, from any kind of foreign press that were there are gone. Any kind of local press
Yeah.
who could get out have got out reasonably. So all you're kind of left with now is, and I think as we mentioned earlier, is just kind of propagandists almost from both sides, either whether it's from the Taliban or from um, like the opposition to the Taliban. So it's really
Yeah.
difficult to get a good handle on exactly what's going on. And sometimes the only thing you hear is, again, referring to the refugees who got killed on the Pakistan border. You just hear like maybe one or two people say something, and then you see like there's like a blurry photo of some corpses or something, and then it's people say it's from this event, but there's literally no way of proving one way or the other. Um, and it's literally like an Osint nightmare to try and get a good grasp on exactly what is going on in the country without reliable sources and without like a reliable stream of information from like local media.
Yeah. And in that regard, it's very much becoming a little bit like Myanmar, and sort of
Yeah,
Venezuela as
Jesus.
well. Both.
Cuba as well, like the protests
Yeah.
in Cuba, like I don't think they just fizzled out one day. I think again
They were.
they cut the internet and they were probably put down brutally. Like same as in Myanmar, which um, as far as I can tell, they're kind of moving more towards a political settlement. I think at the moment it seems to be not so much fighting, but
Yeah.
definitely in the early days it was really difficult to kind of get in. They were turning the Wi-Fi off every night, pretty much, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fair to say as well, obviously, with everything that's been going on in Afghanistan, those, Venezuela, Myanmar, Cuba, those sort of stories, they've not gone away. They're still ongoing.
Yeah.
Maybe with next episode, we'll hopefully discuss any updates we've got from those parts of the world a little bit more. I think it's fair to say the podcast has been fairly focused on Afghanistan now for probably 2 months, maybe more. I think it's fair to say it's been the biggest story of the open source intelligence world now for some time, and we're coming towards the end now of this episode, so we're gonna start wrapping things up here. We just want to. We'll start off, I think, with just some of the other stories from around the world. So, this evening, while we're still on the topic of Afghanistan and sort of the resurgence of terrorism in that country, a British citizen has been sentenced to 12 years in prison this evening for supplying £55,000 worth of Bitcoin to ISIS.
Jesus.
I have to admit,
Wow.
I'm actually pleasantly surprised by the length of that sentence.
Oh, is it a
That
reasonable
is
one
that
for
is pretty impressive for for terrorism offences. Realistically, I think it's fair to say in the UK we've had a bit of a mare with some of the terrorist convictions in recent years, as was shown by one or two of the ones who got out and then went on to carry out attacks. Um, I've sort of tweeted about that, so I won't say much more about that now. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Did you see on the topic of sorry, just like terrible terrorism sentences, did you see the British Nazi yesterday or the day before who was he was found with like bomb making materials or bomb making instructions, which to be honest, I didn't read too much into what the instructions were. It's for all I know, it was like the anarchist cookbook, which is, a very common thing that goes around. But apparently he had like extreme far right ties, and yeah, he was. I don't know if he was a member of any prescribed groups, but he was sentenced to what was it? Read Agatha Christie, I believe, was his sentence. The
are
judge
you
spade
serious?
genuinely. The judge spade him prison and sentenced him to read some Agatha Christie.
Oh my god,
Um,
that is.
Let me see. I think I'll just quickly Google it. Um,
Yeah, that
was it?
that is the extent of the UK justice system, folks. It is a joke. Um,
Maybe it wasn't Agatha Christie, but it was some author that was it made I thought it was a joke when I read it, but yeah, yeah, definitely the UK justice system needs a bit of an overhaul in
yeah.
terms of terrorism offences.
Um, the UK Ministry of Defence today confirmed that the next set of exercises involving the UK's carrier strike group will take place after a brief visit to Japan. At the moment, we have confirmation that the British, US, and Dutch vessels will be joined by at least 4 Japanese warships alongside a Canadian frigate. No doubt there's going to be some spectacular photos coming from those exercises, which I'm sure you'll be able to find on Twitter in the coming days. As we mentioned earlier, there was, of course, the news this morning from New Zealand of a ISIL-inspired terrorist attack in which 6 people were stabbed. Credit to the local law enforcement, the attack lasted less than 60 seconds before the guy was shot dead by police, which is, honestly, that kind of response is just incredible.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think he was the only fatality as far as that was the latest I heard on it as well. It was
Yeah,
just 6 stabbed, but luckily
none of
no
them dead.
deaths.
Yeah, which is obviously very, very good news. Um, I don't know if you've heard anything further regarding the Israeli airstrikes in Syria last night.
I haven't seen any kind of information on targets. It looks like the explosion that was heard over kind of northern central Israel in the middle of it was a wayward Panjshir missile,
Hmm.
judging by debris photos that have kind of emerged this afternoon or this evening. Um, I can't imagine much is going to come of that. It
Hmm.
happened. I was looking this up earlier. I think it was back in April when it was the S-200 missile, which I'm not sure how close it got to like the nuclear site, but close enough to kind of trigger a bit of a panic
Yeah.
that I can't remember, is it Dimona nuclear site in Israel? There was lots of panic that maybe there was a rocket attack against there, which again was kind of a wayward surface-to-air missile. But it seems this time where that was again like an S-200, which is I don't know if you've seen a photo of them, but they're ridiculous size
Yeah.
missiles. They've got booster rockets on them. They for taking they were I think they were designed for taking out um,
Bombers and
you know
such. Yeah.
yeah, almost like World War II era, Cold War era bombers. So yeah, one of those kind of was the incident in April. This one was a much smaller one. But obviously it is definitely a threat. I don't think it triggered any kind of rocket alert sirens in Israel, like like attacks
No.
from Gaza or attacks from Lebanon have. Um, I also don't think it was intercepted. I think maybe it just kind of came down in open ground somewhere in Israel.
Yeah.
Um, but again, there is obviously a threat from Syria's air defense is more of a threat to neighboring countries than they are to the missiles or the aircraft they're targeting. Especially
Yeah.
Cyprus was a famous one.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to say, I seem to remember there was a case of a rogue surface-to-air missile landing fairly close to RAF units in Cyprus.
yeah, and obviously they shot down a Russian aircraft as well not long after that.
Yeah,
Um, it was so it's it's a bit of a pattern to manage to hit everything except Israeli aircraft or Israeli missiles at the moment.
yeah,
But obviously that was like last night's airstrike. I haven't seen any kind of confirmed targets of that yet. They said it
yeah,
was western Damascus, which could be any kind of anything in the region.
yeah,
Um, I did hear rumors maybe that it could have been targeting air defense sites, which seems to be the a favorite of the Israeli Air Force.
mm,
It wasn't the airport, so it wasn't targeting any kind of weapon shipment or anything like that. So it was more than likely, again, air defense sites. I didn't even, I don't know if you hear different. I don't think there's even any casualties from it. Um,
yeah. I haven't.
but
I've heard indications that it was material damage only, but whether that's just Syrian propaganda at this point, we'll have to wait and see satellite imagery. Um,
yes, exactly. But yeah, other than no, I haven't got anything further on the Israeli airstrikes on that.
right. South Korea has announced that it will spend a whopping $273 billion on defence over the next 5 years, commencing 2022,
Wow.
with plans including investment in a new long range 800 plus kilometre precision missile. Now, part of the reason for this announcement is that the US sort of agreement with South Korea up until now stated that missiles with that kind of range were pretty much forbidden. And I think it's fair to say as well, South Korea is very much sort of dealing with North Korea on its own now, so to speak. It's fair to say they've not really been communicating as much with the US recently. They have been actively trying to negotiate with North Korea, but they obviously still recognise that there is a threat from North Korea, and so they are preparing these new weapons programs. They are also planning to build more of their new 3,000-ton submarines, the indigenous design that has been, well, it's been in the news a fair amount, I think it's fair to say, for some of the design advances and stuff, and the technology that they're using in these new boats. And the other major announcement from that new defence budget is that troops' pay is set to increase significantly after there's been a number of complaints in recent years that they have been underpaid and drastically so. I believe I read somewhere the pay for a sergeant is going to increase from something like 600,000 of the current of the local currency to near enough 1 million over the next 5 years. Which I don't know how that equates to dollars or pounds.
I'm just checking now.
That sounds like quite a major jump.
So 600,000 is. I'm assuming this is a weekly or a monthly salary because it's only £374.
Yeah, probably a weekly salary.
Yeah, and then 1 million would be that would be about £624.
Yeah,
So surely it can't be monthly; it must be a weekly salary.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and what you were saying before about the missile with like an 800-kilometer range, I was just having a quick look at that. From more or less the most northerly point of North Korea to the most southerly point of South Korea is it's under 1,000 kilometers. So
yeah,
it seems, I mean, a missile like that is
It
I don't want to
is,
say
it's
maybe
theatre
overkill, but
based, isn't it?
yeah. But you also have to wonder if maybe North Korea is the only possible, possible threat they're thinking of a missile with a range like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, South Korea and Japan even don't have great relations.
Mm.
Not so much that they're going to go to war any day, but they definitely aren't friendly as such. And even, the kind of elephant in the room, you've got China on, off to the east of them.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to look at like 800 kilometers. I mean, it's only, from the South Korean coast to the Chinese coast at the shortest point. Um, Looking at, I don't know, maybe 300 kilometers or something like that,
Mm.
360 kilometers. So, I can't imagine China is going to be overly thrilled with South Korea developing these kind of long-range missiles. Um, and on topic of that as well, the other week there was Japan were placing long-range missiles just east of Taiwan,
Yeah.
with like the range to kind of target China as well, which is. And I think I mentioned maybe to you or maybe to someone the other week that we've got a real possibility of in the next 12 to 18 months of having like almost a new Cuban missile crisis in the South China Sea or East China
Mm.
Sea, I guess at this point, which is definitely going to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And just to wrap up our news stories for the week, a US Navy MH-60S helicopter operating from the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln off the coast of the US has crashed on the 31st of August. One of the 6 crew members has been rescued from the sea, and search and rescue efforts for the other 5 are still underway.
Where did that crash? Sorry.
I believe it was just off the coast of San Diego somewhere, about 50 kilometres.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of late evening, about 50, 60 kilometres off the coast. Obviously, that is not too hopeful if they've managed to recover one crew member, but they can't find 5.
No. No.
And it comes obviously with the tragic loss of the 13 US forces in Kabul in that blast last week as well. So it's not been a good week for the United States, I think it's fair to say.
No, I think that's probably. I mean, obviously including Kabul, that's probably one of the worst weeks for a long, long time.
So, on that note, it is time to end. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you don't already follow Kyle, be sure to go and follow him at Kyle J. Glen on Twitter, and also find the @Conflicts Twitter account that he runs. Both of us and Technical are also, of course, members of the Military Aviation Tracking Alliance at Osint, which you can find on Twitter as well. Worth giving all of those accounts a follow, particularly if things like the Kabul airlift were of interest to you. And unless you've got anything else to add, Kyle?
No, nothing. Just thank you for having me. I've had a good time.
It's been good to have you. With that, we will call it a quit, and we will catch you all again in about 2 weeks' time.